I'm Debbie Cook. Actually, I worked at the North and South River Watershed Association and actually started the Gardening Green Expo years ago. And while I was there, I learned about biochar because I headed the Greenscapes program, which is one of the sponsors of this. And I've been obsessed ever since. And so anyway, and one of the things I wanted to say is Abraham Monahan is here from Bartlett Tree Experts. So when I first learned about biochar, I contacted Bartlett Tree Experts. They're the foremost tree research company in the country. And I talked to the head guy there, and he said, I said, is this the miracle I think it is? And he said, yes. He said, we call it a miracle, you can too. So let me get started. Okay, so it is a miracle. Okay, and what is biochar? Biochar looks like this, ground up. This is a ground up version. But if I put this much in the palm of my hand, just about a gram, it is a honeycomb of pores. And it can store huge amounts of water, fighting drought. It provides shelter for microbes because it's like a condo. It's like everything can be stored in those pores. It's pure carbon with the pores, and if you stretch out just this much, it can cover the 2 tennis courts, the pore surface area. So you can imagine its capabilities. So it was invented 2,500, maybe 6,000 years ago in the Amazon. It's been a long time. And it allowed the Amazon to actually support millions of people. I always was taught that that was kind of a virgin territory. I mean, that's sort of the prevailing wisdom. The Amazon teemed with people. And it was only because of biochar that they could live there. Because normally their soil is like this, complete clay. But when you add biochar, it's like the glue that allows all the other nutrients and everything to stay intact. So without and it took only about 40 or 50 years ago did they discover that it was biochar was the actual glue that held it together. So initially, as I said, the Amazon teamed with people. And the explorers came, and basically all the people, 90% of the people died, and all their knowledge went with them. So today, because they don't have any of the knowledge of how to make biochar, they actually have, the explorers, great explorers, gave them sickles and things like that, and they do slash and burn agriculture, which gives them a couple of years of growing and then completely depletes the soil. So I went to Peru with this woman, Frederique Apfel-Margland. She's a Smith College professor. She was studying the Quechua people in the northeast corner of the Amazon. And she was finding that the people they weren't able to live off their land. Some people were having to go 8 hours to farms, to farm. And so she said, well, maybe what I need to do is to give these people back, their heritage so they can stay there. And so we went to a place called Lamas in Peru. And so what we did, I'm going to really cut short what I usually say about all this, but it was very mystical, rustic, and we were making the terra preta black soil, of which biochar is the part. So the first thing is, it's called Llana Achpa in Quechua. And they basically, these are the things that we collected and then made the terra preta soil. And as you can see, biochar is only 2.4 kilograms of the whole concoction. So here we went out, we were collecting up here cow dung. That was for the microbes. This is he's carrying a whole bag of cow dung on his back. And then here we were actually making compost. Now, the thing is, they don't have compost in the Amazon because the second that any leaf litter falls, the leafcutter ants and everything eat it up. So there is really no compost. So this is kind of what the native people there, the Quechua, had to also do, was make the compost. While we were there, it was really interesting. We learned while we were there where they got the microbes from the cow dung, because they didn't have cows, or anything like that. It was just humans. But they found wherever the terra preta soil was, they found pottery shards. And then they realized they were collecting their own fecal matter and using that for the microbes. Very inventive. So we went, the other thing that, is the soil needs are minerals. So we had to go and we collected minerals. We went in a little safari truck, and we collected, this was probably the hottest day ever, and we're out in the boiling sun, getting rocks. So, so those are the components. I told you, they're all put together. What we would do is they all sat for a month, and we kept rotating the pile back and forth with those, mixing it up and mixing it up. It took about a month for for all of those things to come together. So the biochar needed also to be loaded with microbes, and I'm going to get into that. But first of all, it's man-made. It's by a process called pyrolysis, and it's burning organic material at high heat without oxygen. So it's different than charcoal because it's got less oxygen and higher heat. And it also makes, when you make it, it makes these cool byproducts. So it makes syngas, energy, biofuels. It makes a wood vinegar that is that's like in the chimney where you're making it. You can use that. It's very powerful for a fertilizer. So this is Frederique, and this is us making the biochar part. Okay, so she had designed these ovens, and we used coconut husks. So here's the process that we used. If you could see, it's really hard to see in here, I think, but anyway, there's two chambers. There's a lower chamber of this thing that she had. The lower chamber is where we built a good fire. And then the upper chamber was closed and locked. Can you see that right there? So that's where we put the coconut husk. So we got the real raging fire going, shut this. The heat of this actually caused it started to smolder up above without any kind of exposure to fire or anything. Just the heat caused a combustion. We let it go for about a half hour, and then we pulled out, we pulled it out, and then the important thing is you have to quench it right away. So otherwise it'll keep burning, it'll burn right down, and then it'll be ash. So that's the really important thing. So we quenched it, and then we had our biochar. And here we are, with the pile. We've added the biochar to all that other stuff and just had this major pile, and we all walked on it, and we had to break the biochar apart because it actually comes in chunks, but you want to get it finer like that. So here are some of our Quechua friends. This is this I just put in because it was really cool. They were doing a planting ceremony, and so basically this is a fermented corn drink that they use. That's what they do to before they go planting. This is their planting stick. So they throw the biochar in, they do the planting stick, and then they throw the seeds in. So why is biochar a miracle? So it is, as you can see, it can make a huge difference in the growth of plants. So it does fight drought because, as I said, those pores can hold an immense amount of water. It makes plants healthier because actually, you know, they have access to more microbes and everything else. But they found that it actually cut down on diseases. And so even like in nurseries, if they use those to plant in nurseries, it cuts down on white flies and all kinds of things. So it improves soil fertility, and for me, a major thing is climate change. It's a major way of sequestering carbon in the soil. And so I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. So this is an example. This was Todd Breitenstein. He had the Grateful Garden up on 53, and I introduced him to biochar. And so I think you can really see the difference that he did in Hanover. Can you see the difference of the tomato plants and, you know, and the growth? Okay, so biochar makes plants healthier. So this experiment was done at the Morton Arboretum. That's probably one of the most foremost research facilities in the country too. And this is honey locust seedlings, just showing the difference of their root structure. And this is just, you know, I wish I had something better to show, but you know how it fights drought. You can see that biochar in the growing seasons, it still holds a lot more water than no biochar, and so it makes a difference in holding water. So one of the major things I want to talk about is fighting climate change. And to me, this is like a big, one of the major benefits of it. So the carbon cycle, everybody knows the carbon cycle, right? I mean that basically if you look at a forest for, let's say, 100 years, and so, you know, and the trees grow, and so they're bringing in the carbon from the atmosphere, and then when they die and they decompose, that is all being released back up. It's gone along for millennials, and it was all in balance until fossil fuels, when all of a sudden we're bringing in all this new carbon that was never there before or was sequestered in the soil. So what happens here is that what we're doing is taking biomass. You can use almost anything to make biochar if it's organic. You can use algae, you can use just about anything. However, it's better if it has more of a cellular structure. So, you know, things like wood and everything are better. So when you do pyrolysis, which, you know, I talked about like with the chambers and how we had the fire, 50% goes into carbon in biochar where it is stable. People say, I mean, it's been around for, you know, maybe 6,000 years. So we know that it can be stable for thousands of years. And then so 50% goes there, and then 50% goes into syngas or bio oil that we can use. I mean, that has incredible characteristics that we can use. And it goes into energy, and then 50% of that goes back into the atmosphere. So what they say is that for every pound of biochar, I think I've got a slide on that, 1 pound of biochar removes 3.7 pounds of carbon dioxide from the air, because it's basically the carbon is being put in. I mean, obviously it's not being brought down directly, but it is, you know, taking available carbon and putting it in the soil. Now, I wanted to say that this is gaining, when I first started working on this about 12 years ago or more, you know, it was really something hardly anyone had heard of, and still people haven't heard of it. But it's starting to gain serious traction. And as you can see, I don't know if you can read this, but Grassley, there's a bipartisan bill that was introduced just, I think, in March, that to study biochar for agricultural uses. And So it's basically the research. This is from David Laird. He said, "I applaud the introduction of the Biochar Research Network Act. It enables the research it enables will pave the way for a new industry that creates jobs and opportunity across rural Iowa, producing biochar and next generation biofuel." And they said it holds the potential to benefit crop production, nutrient retention, and reduce the life cycle carbon intensity of crops. So, I mean, basically it's starting to really get recognized. And the U.S. Forest Service is sponsoring all kinds of seminars on it and using it. And, you know, basically it's becoming really well known. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was why there are barriers to it being, you know, being made on like an institutional scale. It's not like Nike sneakers where you can just make them in a factory and then you can, you know, send them out all over, you know, the country or the world. It's just not possible. First of all, biochar is organic, so you've got to bring it to the plant. So you don't want it to come from too far because it negates the purpose of it. And it also, it can be uneven. It's very hard, you know, to replicate exactly the same material that you're using each time. It's hard to replicate exactly the same temperature. So there are variations. So I think one of the things about biochar is it needs to be regional, and and people need to understand its benefits, but they're never going to have like the perfect 100%. This is always going to be the same thing. We're dealing with something that's very different. I think that's one thing that's been a real impediment to its adoption.